Tonight on Primetime Politics, English only.
It showed a lack of empathy and a lack of sensitivity.
Air Canada's chief executive officer is summoned to Ottawa after issuing a message of condolence over deaths in LaGuardia, but failing to do so in both official languages. Coming up, we'll hear what the Prime Minister has to say about the issue. Also,
thanks for having me. Great to be back in Texas.
I'm glad we finally did this.
The Ottawa Bureau Chiefs on Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative leader's appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast. What did it achieve? We'll get into that. And Suzuki meets the Prime Minister. We'll speak with David Suzuki about his meeting with Mark Carney today and get his assessment of the PM's environmental track record. This is Primetime Politics. Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. Well, Air Canada's chief executive officer is being called to Ottawa, summoned to answer questions about the statement of condolence he made in the wake of the LaGuardia collision. 2 pilots contracted to Air Canada were killed in that collision, co-pilot Mackenzie Gunther from Ontario and 30-year-old pilot Antoine Forêt from Coteau-du-Lac in Quebec. But in offering words of condolence, the company's CEO, Michael Rousseau, only uttered 2 French words, bonjour and merci. All the rest in English only. That has outraged many political leaders in Ottawa and Quebec, including the Prime Minister.
I'm very disappointed in, as others are, rightly so, in this unilingual message of the CEO of Air Canada. It doesn't matter the circumstance, but particularly in these circumstances, a lack of judgment and lack of compassion. As you know, the Committee of Official Languages has summoned the CEO to appear before it. I will follow his comments closely and comments which I would expect in due course from the Board of Directors of Air Canada.
Now, Air Canada CEO Michael Rousseau has been the subject of controversy before. After being appointed to his position back in 2021, he stated that as one who lived in Montreal for, at the time, 14 years without speaking French, he was too busy to learn it. He subsequently promised that he would take French lessons, but the failure to use any French in the statement of condolence this week is renewing the call for Rousseau's removal.
And actually, we have the CEO who don't care about French, because 5 years ago been asked to learn French, at least for this statement, for the death of the 2 pilots from Quebec. He's at least can read in French. Doesn't matter if you understand it, but at least he can read a screen in French, but he didn't do that. So it's unacceptable.
You should leave. You should acknowledge the fact that he doesn't have the requisite respect for Quebec society and all French Quebecers and French Canadians to keep the job he has presently. The board of Air Canada should act on it. The government should put all necessary pressure on the board for them to make the only right decision in this situation, and it's to make sure that he leaves.
Michael Rousseau has until May the 1st to appear before Parliament's Official Languages Committee. We will continue to follow the story. While the Prime Minister was away, the leader of the official opposition got to play last week. Pierre Poilievre using a break in the parliamentary calendar to head south and push the benefits of Canadian trade to an American audience. Poilievre's trip included stops to Detroit, where he talked about manufacturing and cars, to Texas, where he talked about energy, and to New York City, where he wrapped up the trip with a speech on Canada-US relations. But it was that stop in Texas that received the most attention, in large part because that is where Mr. Poilievre sat down with Joe Rogan, the host of the Joe Rogan Experience, a podcast that attracts millions of listeners with each episode. And with that, here's a taste of what was shared.
And the tariffs aren't a good idea either. We should get the tariffs out, because there's so much we could be doing together as neighbors and partners if we got rid of those tariffs. I think what are the biggest problems in America today? Affordability, security. And we can help with both. We knock the tariffs down.
Well, I also spoke with the bureau chiefs today about Pierre Poilievre's interview with Joe Rogan. Here now are Robert Fife from the Globe and Mail, Tonda MacCharles from the Toronto Star, and Joël-Denis Bellavance from the Presse.
first of all, I think it made good sense that he did the American tour, and secondly, that he was on a show like Joe Rogan, because he speaks to a lot of Americans who support President Donald Trump. A lot of them are Republicans, a lot of them are MAGA people, and he made the case, a cost of living case to Americans, that tariffs are hurting you, not just hurting Canada. In fact, they're hurting Americans in the pocketbook. And I think it was pretty effective. He was also very careful in saying, when Rogan tried to get him to dump over the Prime Minister, he said, "No, I don't do this on foreign soil," which I applaud Mr. Poilievre for that. I think it was a really good message to a crowd that may not hear very often why tariffs are hurting them, even though they're probably seeing it when they go to the cash register, or when they gas up, or when they buy cars. We know all of this. In fact, he made such a really good point about aluminum, that it's increasing. Americans can't produce enough aluminum, and that we provide a significant amount of aluminum, particularly the car industry. And 50% tariffs on aluminum is it means that it's coming out of American pocketbooks.
Well, what do you make of the timing, Tonda?
Well, I think the timing is really interesting. I mean, it followed on the heels of his trips overseas to London, and his speeches there to conservative audiences, London, and I believe he was also in Germany. But he, I think, is smart to not just go out and try and put his message in front of Americans. All of that is also putting it in front of Canadians, and is getting attention that he doesn't actually try to seek here. He doesn't do 2.5-hour interviews with anybody in Canada. He's done right-wing influencer interviews in Canada, but not mainstream media. And so I think it's an effective way for him to do that. But I also think, to Bob's point, it was also clever of the Conservatives to take the view that they're not going to oppose the government on foreign soil. Canadians want to hear that. And that he's putting forward any concrete and constructive proposals, agree or disagree with his idea of, the dispute with these states is a temporary one, and here's how we can get through it. I think that's positive. I think that's positive for his leadership, and it shows that the Conservatives are following up on his promise to both talk to more people and put forward solutions. So again, agree or disagree with the substance of what he's putting forward. I think there's a real differentiation there. While Carney's saying we're at a rupture with the U.S. and that relationship is over, Poilievre's saying no, it's not. Actually, it's just a temporary thing. It's a function of who's in the office, and here's why we're invaluable to you. And geography doesn't change that.
Joël-Denis?
A few things on that trip in the United States. I think it's interesting that he takes the time to go there to try to sell the Canadian message. It's mostly conservative elected leaders who've done that in Canada. We've seen Doug Ford often on CNN, Fox News, and other networks, so it's a conservative. We haven't seen much of Dominique Leblanc, for example, the minister responsible for the economy and the United States-Canada relationship, on those same networks or participating in making speeches. So the Conservative taking that role, I would say, more and more prominently. And for Mr. Poilievre to go now, I think that it was also some revelation, very interesting, that he's changing text messages with the Prime Minister. He said that during the Joe Rogan interview. And so I'm wondering what Mr. Carney answered back to his comments on that trip. So it would be fascinating to note.
LOL. I heard you. Kissy face.
Sorry. I really want to see the screen now.
But also, will Mr. Poilievre make it a habit of traveling to other countries while the House is not sitting? Tonda mentioned that he was in Europe while the House was not sitting. Last week he was in the United States while the House is not sitting. So I think it's a good habit of his, and he's showing that he can be Prime Minister in waiting by making those calls, by making those trips, not only opposing the government in the House of Commons, but also proposing stuff while traveling abroad. So that I think he played Team Canada last week.
I can tell you who really likes it, his caucus. His caucus likes that he's putting forward a different image to both Canadians and to Conservative allies in other countries.
Well, let me, sorry.
I think this is important. We have we're in a very serious situation with the United States, and they are not negotiating with us now. They've opened the door to the Mexicans. The Mexicans are having bilateral discussions, but nothing is going on right now. And the deadline is July 1st. Whatever is going to happen with UMC or CUSMA, or and when Mr. Poilievre came back, he gave what I would regard as a major speech in the House of Commons. The Prime Minister didn't show up. None of the senior cabinet ministers were there. I think that's a great deal of disrespect for Parliament and for the Leader of the Opposition that they didn't show up to hear his side of the message and to challenge him on their view. It seems more and more under Mark Carney that Parliament is irrelevant.
Well, that kind of touches on what I want to raise. You use the terminology of creating this image for Poilievre of a Prime Minister in waiting, when he can go and present policy platforms. In this case, in front of a podcast that's listened to, I think the estimation is about 11 million people with every episode that comes out with the Joe Rogan Experience. But as he's doing that, how much of this was about the domestic audience versus the American audience? Yes, he says he's there to sell Americans on this idea that tariffing Canada is a bad idea. But at the end of the day, that's to an audience that is not in the White House. And the White House is a very different scenario. They have been very clear. Any country that wants to trade with the United States is going to face a tariff, Canada included. We've heard that from many different channels. So if that is the reality, how much of this was about reaching a Canadian audience more than just reaching an American audience?
Well, look, it was all about reaching a Canadian audience. It was all about trying to tell Canadians that he's abandoned the Canada's broken, and that he's agreeing with the Prime Minister and the majority of Canadians that Donald Trump's tariff policy is bad news, and that it's hurting Americans as much as it's hurting Canadians. He's just got a different take on it, that the Americans, the Prime Minister is saying, well, we've got diversified trade away from the United States. The relationship is ruptured, and he's saying, no, look, it's not. I mean, we live right beside them. There'll be another president. We can't change geography. And I think that's a legitimately good message that he is trying to take to Canadians. The added benefit is that he was speaking to an American audience, and he's a conservative, and he's given a message that they probably don't hear that often.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And furthermore, I think, though, I don't think the Conservatives are under any illusion that many people have 2.5 hours to sit down and re-watch it. But it did generate tons of news coverage, mostly flattering for him, and social media clips, tons, and parodies already. So, I think that's all in their sort of, toolkit, right? They want to push forward messages not just on mainstream media, but where the people, the converted are, but also pushing out messages via social media. That's their game. That's their MO, and they like it.
Joël-Denis?
It will be interesting to see how receptive Canadians are to Mr. Poilievre's message that Canada will remain a close ally of the United States. We've seen a rise of anti-American sentiment in the polls, and Canadians are no longer traveling as much to the United States. For example, they're looking elsewhere, and it's going to take some time before the relationship is, fixed between the two countries. It's going to take maybe a few presidents. Canadians will probably demand some kind of apologies from the United States after what we've gone through, and after what the ambassador to Canada, Mr. Peter, what's his last name again? Hoekstra, yeah. After he insulted Canadians so many times. I mean, he's the official voice of the White House, and we've seen that Canadians are getting more and more nationalists, I think.
Canadians shouldn't hold their breath for apologies from Americans on any of that, and that's not, I don't see that happening. But I think that the notion that this is a relationship that will endure from the Conservatives is at odds with the government's message right now, and
probably mostly Canadians as well.
Probably mostly Canadians too. No, I think you're right on that. But again, they're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere, right? 40 years from now, this looks different.
Hopefully I'm here 40 years from now.
You will be, but Bob and I will not.
There are medical miracles every day. But listen,
David Suzuki on, and he's 90.
Exactly.
Now, come on.
David Suzuki was here. He was 90 years old, great talking, still sharp as a knife. But listen, I live in the riding that Pierre Poilievre used to represent. You know, he was defeated in Carleton, and so I have many friends and neighbors who voted for the Conservative Party and Pierre Poilievre in the last election. And out of this podcast, essentially two reactions that I was noting. One was a big question of where was this Pierre Poilievre in the last election, because they think it could have swayed the result. The second was, which is the real Pierre Poilievre? The Poilievre that we got in the election versus the Poilievre that we got in the Joe Rogan experience. I don't know if you...
Well, I could say, where was Pierre Poilievre a month ago? I mean, Pierre Poilievre he's only begun to travel, and he went to the United States. He went to Great Britain and Europe after criticizing the Prime Minister for traveling, where he's actually meeting world leaders and some of the world's most important investors. And he was criticizing as saying, "Oh, he's doing these free holidays," and now he's finally beginning to travel. So there's a sign, perhaps, of maturity on the behalf of Mr. Poilievre, but I'm holding the jury's out on this guy, because the DNA on him is usually, partisan sniping, over the top. Is he going to learn his lesson from this? We'll see. I'm holding my breath on that, because there are so many times we've said, and well, look, I think he's changing, he's maturing, he's going to be less of a partisan attack dog, and 2 weeks later, there he's back at it. So we'll see.
And that was Robert Fife, Tonda MacCharles, and Joël-Denis Bellavance, part of this week's episode of The Bureau Chiefs with Michael Serapio. A new episode is out now. You can listen anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch it on YouTube as well. Well, for some 50 years now, David Suzuki has been part of the national conversation. Starting his broadcast career with CBC Radio, he is a past host of the program Quirks and Quarks, a past host of The Nature of Things on CBC Television, and is co-founder of the environmental organization that bears his name, the David Suzuki Foundation. Now, yesterday, Mr. Suzuki marked his 90th birthday, but instead of resting and celebrating, he's still out there advocating for the causes he cares deeply about. And to talk about it, we are now joined by David Suzuki. David, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so as I said, yesterday was your 90th birthday.
Right.
So I'm just going to present you something to start off our conversation. You don't need to eat it now.
Okay.
but
me.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay, I figure if you can't eat it or smoke it or drink it,
what's the use?
I'm not interested.
Okay, well, there you go. But happy birthday again, and I appreciate the time you're giving to us, because obviously you are a man who commands respect in many parts of the world, certainly in this country. And some very high-profile people talk to you, including the Prime Minister, with whom you just met on the Hill earlier this afternoon. How did that go? What were you talking about?
Well, it was what I expected. When I knew I was going to be here, I made a request through our representative here if I could meet the Prime Minister. And of course the answer was he's way too busy. But then apparently Mark insisted on giving us a moment to go in. It was a photo op. We got his picture together, and he got to tell me all the good things he's doing. And it's not a real chance to exchange ideas, and I understand that. But I appreciate that he made the time to meet with me and my wife, in that he was signaling that the environment is an important part of his agenda. And we spent the 10 minutes we had together, him telling me about all of the things that are coming in the budget. So, I understand what it is. My only statement to him at the end of our meeting was, we can't fool around. We have an urgent crisis. We can't. Incremental is not enough now. Little law change here, throw some money over there. We've got to make massive change. And I told him, you talked about rupture at the international level. It was a brilliant speech. But there is a rupture all over the world at every level now, at the cities and the provincial level. We've got ruptures because we've reached and passed limits that nature imposes on us.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't go on supporting the same institutions. The economy, politics, legal systems are not set up to confront the crisis we're in.
Okay, I'll pick up on that in a moment, but you talked about the Prime Minister presenting to you essentially his environmental credentials, and yes, he does come with them. Beyond being, past governor of the Banks of Canada and England, of course, he held the role of special envoy with the United Nations regarding the environment, climate change, and finance. What do you make of the Prime Minister's commitment to the environment?
Well, I think it's there. But the problem is it can't work regardless of who's in there, as long as we cling to the same systems, the economic, political, and legal systems, because those three systems we developed to guide and shape and constrain us left nature out. Nature's not a part, it's not the foundation of these systems. And so however enlightened you are, if you're working, and he's a banker, and I believe he is committed, he understands, and I have heard that his wife is the driving force, and I say, if your wife is driving you, you got to listen to that. And the environment is a critical thing, but he really believes, as a banker and now as a politician, he can do it through the regular systems. And it can't, because the systems are fundamentally flawed.
Okay, is that what happened with the last Prime Minister, do you think? Because, Justin Trudeau, had he stayed in office, the polls indicated he would have lost to Pierre Poilievre, largely on things like the carbon tax, environmental regulations like clean electricity standards, emission caps, as well as the EV mandate. Is that what went wrong? The fact that he was trying to sell policies that may not fit this current system?
Yeah, you're the one to tell me. I don't know. I'm not a political analyst, but it was clear the public was done with Justin. They'd had it with him, and Poilievre, as you know, was poised to have a massive election result. And thank you, Mr. Trump. The one good thing Mr. Trump did was to say Canada is a 51st state and blah blah. I believe Trump got Mr. Carney elected because people felt that Carney represented someone who understood the economy very, very well, and somehow they ignored the fact that he's a liberal, and it's been amazing to see what he has done when he got in. I think he's given Canadians a sense of someone who is thinking. I mean, I thought his speech at Davos was brilliant, and it's been hailed around the world. Why? Because he thought a bit. It was a profound speech about the rupture, and people were galvanized by that to realize, yes, that's right, we can't keep acting the same old, same old. If we did that, we'd go on our knees and beg this bully for forgiveness. But Carney stood up and said, no, we can't go on the same way. And that's the only thing that I said to him today in my brief encounter with him. Mm-hmm. The rupture has got to be at every level in society now.
So how would you change it then? You identify three areas that don't fit with the crisis that the world finds itself in right now environmentally. So what changes do you think need to be made?
Put nature back in. Let nature be the foundation of our existence. So whatever you're approving, a new LNG plant or whatever, what is the effect on nature? And if there is a negative effect, you can't do it that way. Come back again with something that makes more sense. But we've got to let nature be the final basis on which we're acting. And then you say, well, how are we going to know where we're going? It's an uncertain future. Greta Thunberg, the power of her speech for me, and she had a bigger impact than any environmentalist ever had. She said as a child, we're taught to take science seriously. And I've read the science, and the science says, if we carry on this way, I don't have a future. And there it was, as blunt as could be, because it was based on science.
I don't want to make too much of a gross generalization here, but is there a sense that it's an either-or proposition? Because right now, Canadians are worried about pocketbook issues. And when you bring up the environment, is it an either-or issue? Yeah. Because I don't know if we've seen a model where it's actually worked.
No, you're absolutely right. And the problem is that nature isn't in that either-or situation. Either way, nature's not a part of that consideration, and that's a problem. We're not saying you shouldn't have an economy, but the economic system we bought into is the capitalist system is so fundamentally flawed for two reasons. One is that it's built on the notion that growth is the very definition of success, that it is a necessary part of that system. You can't grow anything on the planet in a finite world indefinitely. And there are many scholars now who are saying the global economy is way too big. We have to degrow that economy. And I agree with that. But the other thing is that nature's been left out. And nothing shows how fundamentally difficult it is than Mark Carney's book that he wrote before he became a politician.
Values.
The first chapter, he points out Jeff Bezos' Amazon is valued by the economy in the tens of billions of dollars. Brazil's Amazon, the rainforest, the greatest ecosystem on the planet, has no economic value until it is logged, mined, dammed, or grows soybeans, cattle, or houses. That shows right there what the problem is. That we feel that we're supreme and everything in the service of us, like Bezos' Amazon, is worthwhile. But nature, that is keeping the planet habitable for us, has zero economic value. So then you say, okay, but let's work within the system. But the system is all designed and based on the fact that nature has no value. And so when we have arguments with the leaders in Alberta, well, we don't because they won't listen to us, but if you ever ask a leader in Alberta or the Prime Minister who used to be from Calgary, Harper, climate change, they never confront climate change as an issue of importance. No, I mean, Harper said for 9.5 years, doing anything about climate change is crazy economics. So in that simple statement, he was saying that the economy is more important than the atmosphere that gives us air to breathe, that gives us weather, climate, and the seasons. What kind of a system is that? You ask anyone in Alberta today in government, what about climate change? What are they going to say? You know, what is Danielle Smith and the guy before her? You guys are, foreign-funded radicals. You know, you want to destroy our economy, but never deal with the issue of climate change. Mm-hmm. What about the impact on us? It's not relevant to even in our political system. So we're all arguing, oh, well, we could do this. I've just talked to the green budget people, you know, that are trying to get the right things put in the budget. But they're all, you know, and that's great, we need them, but that's all incremental.
Yeah, and as you say, you are advocating for something far more than incremental.
Well, I'm
so
saying
we'll see how it goes.
Our survival in the future is at stake.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also want to note before we're done that you have a new book out, David Suzuki, Lessons from a Lifetime, 90 Years of Inspiration and Activism. So I'm sure you outline a bit of that in this book, if not a lot.
Well, actually, you know, I always say that a funeral is such a waste. You know, people come together and they're saying all these nice things about the person, but he's dead. You know, what good is all that? And so the book, in a way, it has all kinds of little statements from various people about how the work that I've done has affected them. And this is kind of like a funeral oration, and so I'm very, very pleased. I do get, at the end of the book, I do have a chapter in which I try to say what are the important lessons in my lifetime that I feel are worth passing on.
Yeah, and again, there is the book, which people can get out now. I hope you have a long and vibrant life still ahead of you, so no funeral oration needed this evening. But for the time, David Suzuki, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And that is Primetime Politics for this Wednesday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow evening. Until then, take care.